We all get knocked down at some point in our lives, but our resilience defines who we are. During these difficult moments, that's when growth takes place. We must adapt, evolve. They say things will never be the same again. Nah, we say things must never stay the same. We must get better, faster, smarter. We need to constantly change the game. They say recover, rebuild. No, we say rediscover, reinvent. Rediscover our confidence and optimism. Rediscover our inspiration and drive. Reinvent the way we do things, business models, whole industries. Reinvent life. We've been here before. Despite the low moments, we found our highs. Where there was sorrow, we found joy. In weakness, we found strength. So let's step into a new day. Every day is a new day.
Good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm wishing you that you're in good health. Welcome to PACU's One With You, a virtual learning series for education in partnership with PLDT and the Philippine Education Assistance Committee. The theme of our session today is Shifting Education Paradigms and Building Resiliency in Philippine Education. This is Joy Samaniego. I'm from the Philippine Association of Colleges and Universities, and it is my honor to be your host this morning. It is said that disruption births opportunity. Amidst our grief, awareness grows that the trajectory of the crisis is uncertain and that our return to normal may never come soon until the birth of a vaccine. But we believe that we can shift our paradigm and take a collaborative and proactive approach to this pandemic and education crisis. We can reframe this challenge as an opportunity to change learning systems and mindsets. To all those who are tuned in, we really appreciate if you for taking time to be with us and learn from us and our panel of experts. We now have around 2,600 participants and who've registered through our MS Teams platform. This morning, we'll get to hear key learnings from our distinguished speakers as well as share their continuity and learning plans on how the private sector has managed to mitigate the negative impact of this crisis situation. And most importantly, this session aims to highlight the role of technology as we enter the future of work and education and learning, as well as how we navigate through our daily lives. If you have any questions and discussion points for our speakers, feel free to key them in through the chat box feature. Before we begin, uh, here's a quick rundown of our reminders. For uninterrupted viewing experience, make sure you have a stable internet connection. Feel free to use any device to view the virtual event, and for better appreciation, turn up your volume or use your headphones. Now, to officially open the program, we would like to call on our PACU trustee and first vice president, who has served PACU for 10 years and counting. He is currently the president of University of Perpetual Health System Dalta and its three campuses in Las Piñas, Molino, and Calamba, with over 23,000 students and 1,900 employees. He is a staunch believer of digital transformation in education. As a matter of fact, he is already adopted new learning technologies such as learning management system, robotics, and blended learning, including automated operations through a wide university-wide information system. Here to give us his welcome remarks, we have Mr. Anthony Jose Moran Tamayo.
Dr. Carol Enriquez, Dr. Okay, Dr. Carol Enriquez, our PACU president, to fellow PACU board members, our distinguished resource speakers, administrators, and friends who are all watching us live online, good morning to you all. I am truly honored to welcome you in the second edition of the PACU Virtual Learning Series on shifting the education paradigm during the COVID-19 pandemic. This webinar intends to help us manage better the staggering impact of the pandemic in the education landscape and to find innovative ways to hopefully seamlessly shift from a purely traditional to an online distance or blended learning model, while of course paramountly ensuring the safety of our students, teachers, and staff. In today's webinar, we will showcase relevant and exciting topics to be discussed by our esteemed resource speakers, who are experts and practitioners in their respective fields. Our first speaker will give us a better understanding about the challenges of distance education on the school system and a call for innovation. Our second speaker will tackle managing continuity of learning plans vis-a-vis different modes of delivery for different school challenges. And lastly, our third speaker will discuss digital school administration and learning systems for business continuity and blended learning. Before I end, I would like to acknowledge the people behind this webinar series. Thank you very much to the PACU Programs Committee headed by Ma'am Loris Juarez, and of course to our Executive Director Joyce Maniego and the PACU Secretariat. Also, our monumental appreciation to our partners, PEAC, PLDT, Microsoft, for making this event possible. To end, I hope all of us will find this webinar useful as we shift our paradigms and apply the lessons we've learned to our respective institutions. Moreover, I hope that our organizational capabilities would be further strengthened and our business continuity plans will be carried out to full fruition as we face the challenges and seize the emerging opportunities of this new normal situation. Let us not allow the pandemic to hinder our mission of providing the best education to the next generation, which they truly deserve. Again, thank you for attending this webinar. Have a productive day ahead and always stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Anthony, for building hope among our schools and administrators. So we go now to our next first speaker. Our first speaker is Dr. Vicente K. Fabella. He's the 6th president of Jose Rizal University. His stellar leadership in education management has brought JRU to become a robust, reputable, and future-proof institution. But beyond the confines of JRU, his career extends to the entire private education space and can be described as a sustained humanitarian effort to address the pressing challenges of private education in the national scene. A true education policy reformist, he has helped pave the way to the transformation and resiliency of the private education space in the Philippines, with the intent of leveling the playing field and upholding the complementarity between public and private education, from the transition of the basic education system to the K-12 program and the senior high school voucher management program under EGASPE, the universal access to quality tertiary education, and at present, through pushing for economic stimulus bills that hopes to provide funding support to the education sector, who is experiencing seismic shifts due to the unintended effects of COVID-19. He took his AB in Economics and Development Studies in Brown University, Rhode Island, a Master in Public Administration with concentration in Advanced Public Policy Analysis from Columbia Schools of International and Public Affairs in New York, a Master in Business Administration with concentration in business policy, finance, and economics from Columbia Business School. And finally, a Doctor of Philosophy in Business Administration, specializing in business strategy, and in particular, industrial economics and game theory from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Dr. Vince is viewed by his colleagues, associates, and friends as a well-rounded academician, an intellectual whose actions speak louder than words. He is circumspect and uses few words to make big points. He has a disarming manner that could be described as politely and tenaciously focused, especially in his advocacy of affordable quality education and academic excellence. To talk about the challenges of distance education on the school ecosystem and call for innovation, please welcome Dr. Vince K. Fabella.
Hi, Joyce. Thank you, Joyce. Thank you also to Paco and PLDT and PAYAC. And good morning, everyone, all of you watching from your cute little screens. So I'm going to share a presentation. I'm going to also time myself to make sure I don't go out of time. But I'm here to talk about really the challenges of bringing in a distance education systems. And I'm going to try to put a little bit of spin in it. So I'm going to share first my presentation. Hopefully you all see it. Great. Looks like you're all seeing it. So let's see. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to cover 4 items. I'll start by laying out the context. That's the new normal. I'll talk about the challenges to schools. I'll talk about what really it means to innovate during this time, which I think is really behind a lot of the challenges we have. And finally, I'll talk about some government updates. So let's start with the new normal and viewing it from a school's perspective. There's a lot of stuff we don't know, but there's also a lot of stuff we do know. And it's the stuff we do know that I guess the hypothesis I'm making or the argument I'm making is what we know is enough to move forward. Around when I first presented this around, I guess the beginning of April, it was a much more uncertain time. There's still a lot of uncertainty, but a lot more knowledge on what to do moving forward. Here are 6 items we do know. We know that there will be flexible learning. DepEd has wholeheartedly accepted it. CHED is about to come out with, from their technical working group with approvals for schools, colleges, and universities to go into flexible learning, which includes online learning. There's been a big question in recent weeks about face-to-face. That's F2F. I'm on point number 2. With social distancing, but it looks like that will push through. The IATF has already said that, if you can hear me, the IATF has already said that areas in MGCQ will be allowed to do face-to-face. And so we expect over the next couple of months that as more areas hopefully go into MGCQ, more face-to-face will be allowed. But the short of it is that you should be planning for it. We know that return to work, I'm in item number 3. We know that return to work has been okayed and that work from home, I love acronyms. Work from home is also going to be part of our DNA running schools. We know that a recession is probably going to happen this year. We know there is the risk of repeat infections and lockdowns, even if we go into MGCQ. And finally, we are all hoping for a vaccine. So before I continue, let me just get the vaccine question out of the way. I was kind of lucky enough the past 2 weeks to sit in a video chat with the chairman of Moderna. Moderna is one of the leading pharmaceutical research companies in the US involved in trying to figure out a vaccine for COVID-19. They're very close to phase 3. Phase 3 is pretty much the testing period you need before FDA approval. Only 3 companies are in phase 3. And so basically what happened is he said a realistic expectation, and I'm using his words, a reasonable expectation for a vaccine is the middle of next year. And he is most likely talking about the US. So One way to think about it is you can think about what you need to do to survive until the vaccine comes. Then you might think that we're back to normal. And I will argue that's not the case. Let me continue. So what else do we know about um, the new normal? We know the recession will have an impact on enrollment. Uh, I don't think it will be even throughout, but most of us are already preparing for scenarios wherein enrollment is less. We know parents will have less spending power. We know there will be health fears. On expenses, we don't really know what will happen. We know flexible learning has its own savings. You don't have to put up a new building or you don't have to expand your classrooms, but we also know it has its own costs, right? In terms of investments in flexible learning technology and teacher training. So that's a question mark. We also know that there will be changes in learning delivery approaches. Flexible learning can be broken down into online. There's a low bandwidth solution. A lot of schools are thinking of remedial and catch-up periods. We know that physical distancing will be here, or social distancing will be here for a while. And if you have a class that used to handle 40, we used to think you'd cut it by 50%. It's actually a little less. It's about one third to a little over one third of what your usual capacity is. We know that people are looking at curricula and trying to find out what you can cut from a congested curricula. DepEd has led the approach here. They've already say they've cut off 60% of their competencies for a strong core. And we hope CHED will do the same. And of course, there's training and content. So if we know all of that, what do we do, right? So what I did is I painted kind of the new normal for schools. And now let me get into the crux of the presentation really is what do we do? And beyond anything else, think this quote, right? In times of uncertainty, which is now, be very flexible. So that's my quote. I put it in quotation marks so it sounds wise. But a lot of people have said similar quotes, right? The important thing is to be flexible. When you don't know what's about to happen, your organization has to be flexible. And I'm going to go through how to be flexible. So these probably a few slides will sound weird because they're not talking about distance education, but they are the base in being flexible to figure out what you're going to do with your educational delivery systems. The first really is flexibility in operations. You have to preserve cash. So those of you who are involved, those of you running your schools, this will be very critical for you. Those who are not running your schools, you might be running parts of it on the academic side. You have to think of these things through as you work through your budgets. The ultimate tool for flexibility, and this cuts across all businesses, including schools, is to preserve cash. We know it's going to be a flexible learning environment, so anything that does not aid into that, put aside and defer. Buildings, lab upgrades, even small things like faculty outings and uniform subsidies. Your goal is to enter flexible learning, which is anytime now, with a strong balance sheet. So these slides are going to be made available to you, don't worry. So I'm not going to go over every bullet, but these are the bullets. The one thing I will want to say for the universities is research, right? Try to realign your research. Anything related to COVID, I think or to flexible learning are the priorities now. Second bullet is to make your worst case scenario and plan for worst case scenarios and build up for there. Have the conversations early. I'm on the last bullet with your key players. So the point I'm trying to make here is if you're trying to preserve cash, you won't be able to do it top down. You'll probably have a lot of processes and policies and agreements which expect you to spend cash. So talk to the people who you're in contract with. The most common probably is the union, right? And talk about plans for the next 12 months at least to have a strong cash buffer. Next thing you need to do is to sell differently, right? Look at the first quote. Don't sell them a yacht when they need a lifeboat. Think about your message, right? Don't talk about how great your education is. Some of you will. That's your tagline, that's your branding. But that might not be what they need right now. Find out what they need. Is it safety? Is it security? Is it accessibility? right? The way to sell is digital. Everything is digital now. There's a big technique in digital marketing called A/B testing, and that's what you guys have to get into. Google, Facebook, they've all reduced their ad revenue and all the prices of all their tools. So A/B testing is you're sending out multiple messages, and within a week you can figure out which message is sticking with your public. Do that. The traditional university way is to spend a lot of time figuring out your message, send that, and hope it works. It's no longer that way. Third bullet, right? In selling, think about your tuition and TOSF, tuition and other school fees. It may need an overhaul. What we like to say in economics, if you can see me gesturing, right, is that your production function has changed. The way we are going to teach and bring about the learning experience in our universities, colleges, and schools is going to be different, right? And because it's different, your costs of doing that will be different. Now, your tuition and other school fees structure is, especially miscellaneous fees, right? It's usually based on your traditional way of delivering classrooms, right? Teacher hours, faculty hours, those are your costs. You've got to re-examine that from the ground up. Otherwise, you'll spend for all of that, and then you're trying to figure out where to get the money for your FLOs, for your flexible learning initiatives. The last thing to do is to communicate clarity aggressively, right? So what we know is that internet presence among the millennials, among the titos and titas, anyone you can think about is very high right now. That's where the communication happens. And communication just isn't social media. It's webinars, it's ways to get back to the community. Use the whole gamut and explain what you're doing. And you have to do it now because there's a lot of uncertainty. And as long as there's uncertainty, they will be thinking twice about going to your school or college. Now, the reason I'm bringing all of this up is you need, you need a strong organization before you innovate, right? Second thing is flexibility in learning, flexible learning outcomes, right? You really need to push into online and all its variations. I won't spend much time on this because we've got other speakers for that. The two things I do want to mention in whatever package you have, and that's what you should be doing right now, right, is first a low bandwidth solution. I'm gonna start doing some markups here, right? You'll need a low bandwidth solution for those with weak internet. You'll need to promote that, and you'll really need a face-to-face option, not for the whole semester for colleges or not for the whole year, but for periods where students can come in and talk, right? One school has designed what they call a 2-week review period prior to assessment time, where students can come in and catch up on things they don't understand. I'll just say this slide quickly. Don't take your curriculum for granted. Try to put as much curricular space into it as possible. So that's similar to what DepEd did about cutting out a lot of their competencies. This is the bullet to think about. We're not really in online learning. What we are is in something called emergency remote learning, teaching, and I'll talk about that in another slide. But we're in a situation where people can't do online fully. They're quarantined. So it's a very different learning experience, has a lot of inefficiencies. So fight for that space. Make sure you have a lot of space for faculty to screw up and try to fix up. Right? Finally, don't make the mistake. How much time do I have? 5 minutes, right? Don't make the mistake that once it gets back to face, that things are back to normal. The threat of lockdowns and the lack of a vaccine, and we don't even know how widespread the vaccine is going to be, means that you're going to keep you're going to keep bouncing back and forth between face-to-face and online learning. So develop an ecosystem which has both, right? And usually in ecosystems that have both, especially if you're limited in your face-to-face, face-to-face just becomes auxiliary to online learning. So, strong organization. I'm going to talk about the crux of my presentation, and I might cut this on the government updates if I run out of time, but you'll have the slides. I want to talk about innovation, right? So let's talk first quickly about JRU. I asked them to do a slide on JRU, so you'll know I'm not making you bola. We've been doing online since 2006. Technology is a very big part of our vision and mission. We started with computer-aided instruction. We do online all the way from grade school to doctoral studies. So it's a full range. We're on our third iteration of learning management systems. We started in 2006 with 50-50 blends. We first based it on a US model called the National Center for Academic Transformation, and then later aligned with the Sloan Consortium. We've had more than 50, something like close to 54,000 hours of content development. And most importantly, we do a lot of feedback with our students. We poll them aggressively. 96% can access their lessons outside the university. 94% say they understand the lesson better with online. I'm going to skip this one. I just want to present one thing about this. Please look at the matrix. You'll see a yellow, red, green, blue. It's a 2x2 matrix, right? So it's high bandwidth and low bandwidth. This is a typical instructional design matrix. But the one I want you to see are the left and the right, low immediacy. And I'm going to tilt my head, high immediacy. So immediacy means how quickly does the faculty have to respond to the student. And I want you to focus on the left side, which is the green and yellow. These are all tools for low immediacy. So the reason I bring them up is as you figure out what you're doing with the student, and we'll write as innovation, you don't have to respond right away. And the fact that you don't have to respond right away without sacrificing learning outcomes means a lot of the assumptions you make on how you run your educational processes can change. Your scheduling can change, right? You no longer have to log in a professor from 10 to 11 a.m. and have them fight on classroom availability, for example. So I do want to I had mentioned earlier, we're into an area of emergency remote teaching, and that's kind of what I do want to stress right now. A lot of you are trying to move into online, but remember the period we are in right now, the pandemic period. Academic scholars, and there's been a lot of debate on this on the online research community, argue that we're not really in online. A lot of the instructional design assumptions and needs of good online can't be done during a pandemic, just as a lot of the assumptions we make about traditional learning can't be done during a pandemic. So they have something in between called emergency remote teaching. And that's the only thing I want you to take out from this slide, right? As opposed to online, which is you build the plane, then you test it, then you fly it. What we're doing now is building the plane as we're flying it. And this is really a metaphor that's been making its way across a lot of threads. And that's what I want to talk about in going into innovation. So JRU took 14 years to go online. What do we do then? Because many of us don't have, even JRU, right? We wouldn't have 14 years again to do this. We innovate, right? We learn how to build the plane while flying it. And what I'm going to do there is I'll do these 3 slides and I think I'll wrap up. The obvious part of innovation is everything I said in the first part of the presentation, right? Which is to pivot to flexible learning. Do your training, do your content development, pick your platform, which really shouldn't take long. Work on connectivity, which I'll touch on. Make sure you have online processes for student support and faculty support. So none of this, nothing I will say here you'll learn from. You all know this. And next speaker, Leo's an expert in these areas. So I'm going to skip that. I'm going to talk about the not obvious stuff, right? Most of us probably think that once we get into our online and we train our faculty and we get through August or June if you're starting it, right? And things are starting to work and students have figured out that this is how your online works, that we're okay. Innovation isn't about adopting a change and sticking with it. That's my timer. Innovation, I think the best quote I've seen is right now in this pandemic is running a marathon in a minefield. It takes a while, and this is the important part. You don't want to be first place, right? You want to learn what other people are doing and try to get the best of those into your system. Innovation is about learning and improving. That's why this is kind of a rant. You probably heard these cliches before. It's much more an organizational and people challenge. So that's the bullet I want to go over, right? Typically, when we think of quality management or quality assurance, we think of PDCA, right? Plan, Do, Check, Act, stuff like that. That's not innovation. Innovation is minimum viable products. It's a VUCA world. It's rapid prototyping. It's lean processes and voice of customer. I'm sure this seminar is being recorded, so pick up those terms, look them up, try to see how you can start putting them into your school's processes. Because innovation is failing, you've heard this, right? Failing, learning, repeating. And unless you start putting that process in, remember, we're building the plane as we fly it. So unless you start putting those processes in, what you'll have is a first iteration of your ideal system, and then you'll stop there. And you'll wonder why customer response and student response is so bad, right? You have to keep rebuilding, and you need to build that into your infrastructure. The last bullet I want to share on this slide is the bottom bullet, right? The problem is the educational process is very much standards driven, and so very anti-innovation, very hard to adjust. That's why you really have to work at it, right? The one thing I will add is two tools you can use. One is Intel. Start trying to figure out what other schools are doing. And that you won't find that online. You got to talk to them. Everyone's got your network. We've got like 2,000 people signed up here. You've got PACU, you've got your own associates. Find out what people are doing. It's a minefield. So those who started ahead of time, like those who started in June, find out what they're doing. Those who are in MGCQ already and doing face-to-face, find out what they're doing and look for what academics call the bright spots. Those are the things that work, right? And that's what you look for. Use consortia also, and consortia are self-explanatory, but that's how you leapfrog through the learning process. I think I'm going to stop there. I have a few slides on the government. If I have time, I'll talk about it. It'll take me about 5 minutes. Otherwise, I'll just make them available. So maybe I can get some advice from the moderator. Thank you.
Go ahead, Sir Vince. I'm sure people would want to hear it.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about a few things. We've been, as you know from the intro, we've been very involved in trying to get the government, hope they're not listening, get the government to listen to us. And they are, to give them credit, they are listening, CHED and DepEd. We'll talk a little about that. One thing they've become very aware of, and research has started happening, is there is a cost to delaying education. When you delay it for a month, 2 months, 3 months, there's actually a big economic cost in terms of foregone future wages. And those costs go up to the trillion. Yeah, I think the trillion is the calculation we've seen for the Philippines. So first, face-to-face, right? Different, the takeaway from this slide is, I think, and we had a conversation yesterday with Chair Popoy de Vera, I think face-to-face will be pushing through. It's already opened up for those in MGCQ. I think it will open up for Metro Manila, NCR, should be in the foreseeable future. Definitely, I think it's a strong bet you'll have face-to-face during the first semester. DepEd is the one a little unclear about face-to-face because, you know, there was the whole vaccine announcement. So they're still feeling that out. So we're working on DepEd. There is research coming out right now that actually the least risky group are the grades ages 1 to 15. So that's really the DepEd population. So we're trying to present that to them. Okay. Stimulus. We have a whole bunch of bills. There are 2 big bills. There's a Philippine Economic Stimulus Act, which has been approved by Congress. There's a Bayanihan 2.0 Act, which has been approved by the Senate. Shoshu, Congress approved this, Senate approved this. They don't have counterpart acts. So that's what we're waiting for. I really don't know how this one's going to work through. I think the Bayanihan 2.0 has a higher possibility. There are provisions there that tell them to spend the money for education. Currently, I think there's a debate to look at about 50 billion, which the government will have, and trying to see how much of that can go into education. Third thing we talked about really is support for flexible learning outcomes. And these supports, I do want to mention, are things we've asked the government. So things in green are stuff that CHED and DepEd have said yes to. Things in red were blocked. So allow more to go into FLOs. That's a yes. I think DepEd has said yes. Those of you who aren't aware, there's a technical working group for flexible learning. I think they're going to look at a 5-year period for you to do flexible learning before you have to go through all the accreditations and stuff. Training and development, they've got those programs, consortia arrangements, the Learning Common, I think Paco attended, was set up a few days ago. Our big pain point still seems to be internet, right? No one wants to touch internet. The government looks at DICT and DICT looks at itself. I really don't know what's happening there. We've really been trying to get support there. The last thing I do want to mention, okay, so this is a smart, I decided to blank out, this is my last slide. I decided to blank out the amounts just in case. This is supposed to be for PACU, and I know some of you aren't with PACU, but everyone's talking to SMART and that other one. But I do want to talk to you about very quickly what to look for, right, for flexible learning. So I'm going to get the arrow. Oops. I'm going to get my little pen. So that's basically what most people try to debate on the price. You really should be debating on the amount of data, right? Our estimate is you'll need at least 4 gig for a low bandwidth solution or a regular bandwidth solution without the videos, 4 gig a month, right? And then this stuff, right? And this stuff. These are called the white lists. That's all the stuff that they're willing to not charge the students for data on. Make sure your learning management systems are there. And if they're not, at least with PLDT, they've proven to be very open to putting a lot of stuff on that whitelist. So when you negotiate with them, look for the gigabytes and look about what you can put on the whitelist. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sir Vince, for that very useful and practical lesson. We can almost create a book out of it. Well, we learned so much, and certainly for most of us, we are in emergency remote teaching versus online, as what Sir Dr. Vince has said. And we are learning how to build a plane as we are flying it. And this calls for teamwork, communication, and collaboration among all stakeholders. And there's a cost in everyday education is delayed. That's why we have to really move and work with government to increase internet connectivity, decrease the cost of internet connectivity, and also provide government funding for laptops or devices for students. So if you have, guys, any questions, feel free to put them through the chat box and we will address it through or during the Q&A segment. And we're actually getting a lot of questions now in the chat box. We will proceed to our next speaker. Our second speaker is Mr. Leo De Velez. Leo is the founder and chairman of Front Learners Incorporated, an e-learning content and platform provider for K-12 schools, colleges, and universities. Leo was formerly an executive in a multinational oil company based in Singapore. He obtained his master's in liberal arts, mathematics for teaching at Harvard University. He also obtained an MBA and a BS in mechanical engineering degree, where he graduated cum laude at the University of the Philippines. In 1990, Leo ranked #1 in the mechanical engineering board exam. He is an alumni of the Philippine Science High School. Leo is an electronics and math enthusiast with 20 years of experience in e-learning. His skills and advocacy led him to develop Front Learners. Front Learners provides ready-to-use curriculum-aligned e-learning content and platform to schools. For the past 4 years, Front Learners have served 150,000 students for more than 100 schools nationwide, located in cities or IP communities through its online and offline e-learning solutions. Front Learners is multi-awarded in education technology. In 2017, Front Learners e-learning was the grand prize winner in a disaster recovery and resiliency competition launched by the United Nations Development Program among 10 ASEAN countries. Mostly recent, Front Learners was awarded as one of the top 10 startups in Southeast Asia. To talk about managing continuity of learning plans vis-a-vis different modes of delivery for different school challenges, we give the floor to Mr. Leo De Velez.
Okay. Good morning to all. Thank you, Joyce, for the nice introduction. So I'll now show my screen. I'll share my screen. And for an outline, I'll practically breeze through the introduction. Joyce have given longer than I would like it to be. Then I'll go to the business continuity and then the learning continuity and go deep into e-learning and where we can help the schools. Okay, so on the introduction, I just would like to mention that front learners, although we're providing e-learning to schools, we are not actually a school and we do not operate as a school. So that's all I would like to add to the introduction of Joyce. Thank you, Joyce. And now I will go to the Managing of Learning Continuity Plan. I changed the title a bit kasi nauutal ako ng konti, but okay. But before I go to the Learning Continuity Plan, I would like to show an example of business continuity plan. This is about typhoon risk. And we know that the likely impact of that is just maybe a week disruption in the learning continuity or the learning activities. But for pandemic, as what we have experienced now, the disruption is really for several months. And this is in line with Dr. Fabelja's presentation, where we also have, before we even address the learning continuity, we need to make sure that the management team is up and running and we slowly build up our financial strength because the impact of shutdown is really a lot in terms of the financial strength of the school and also with the personnel administration. So once we address this area, then we can now actually move on to the learning continuity. So going now to the learning continuity, part of that is key stakeholder management. And here is an example on how we need to do it. We need to identify the stakeholders, their degree of influence, in what phases we need to engage them, who should engage them, what are the approach that we need to do, and the tools, as well as the frequency. And then we monitor that using traffic light to help us, to help management decide whether to go or no go. So basically for addressing the learning continuity plan, we need to engage fully DepEd, the parents, teachers, students, and our shareholders. Okay, and this is one of our key stakeholders, so we need to manage DepEd. And for PACO, also CHED. Now let's go to the learning continuity plan. So it's about the different modes of delivery for different school challenges. And this can be grouped into two challenges, the connectivity and the devices. Okay, so connectivity, you can have fast internet, slow, and no internet at all at home. And then for the devices, you can have devices and internet, also devices, but no internet, and then really those students with no devices. So for those with access to the internet and devices, one of the delivery mode possible is e-learning. So the e-learning with the learning management system and curriculum-based content that will be suitable for self-directed learning, as well as chat and forum messaging, plus a separate video conferencing tool. So I'll show later on how to address the slow internet challenges for this option. Okay, for those with no internet, which is a bit difficult to address, but they have devices, then the school may be able to help them by providing them an e-learning system with download feature where students, through their representative, download the content and the courses, and then later on in the week, upload their accomplishment and download the next set of learning content. So that will help address the lack of internet by allowing the students' devices be brought to places where there is connectivity, either in the school hotspot or in the office of mom and dad. So they can do that. So this is these are the challenges when we adopt that downloading option. So slow internet, but going to the no internet with device. So these are the things that we need to provide them, as I mentioned earlier. So, and then as mentioned by Dr. Pabella, consider getting group discount for internet data. Okay, and consider also using mobile app for downloading of courses. Ayan. So this is my recommendation. So downloadable learning materials. Now for those with no devices and no internet connectivity, one of the solutions is to use printed learning materials. That would mean using textbooks and workbooks, either old or new textbooks. For private schools and colleges and universities, working individually to talk with a cable TV provider or air channels for radio and TV will be a bit difficult. So we may have to wait for DepEd's and CHED's arrangement on this. So for those that will go for print option, so as I mentioned, you can use old and new. And then you have to print learning materials, mainly learning guides and assignments for the students. But that would mean arranging logistics for the distribution and collection of these materials. So that's a bit challenging. So if possible, the recommendation is, yes, go for e-learning with download feature, avoid printing materials, and if possible, look for cheap tablets, even secondhand, because it will be cheaper than printing cost. It will even be cheaper if we factor in the logistics cost. Okay. And then here are the requirements as mentioned in the Department Order 13. CHED may come up also with a similar thing, but this is about the things that we need: the platform, the content, the assessment, the engagement of the teachers, parents, and learners as part of the requirement by the Department of Education. We also have, as a manager of the school, in implementing learning continuity plan, we also have to balance the types of pedagogy that we will be using. So you can have asynchronous, or basically we will mimic the classes, the teacher-led classes into the cloud, into the internet, or we can also adopt asynchronous or self-directed individualized learnings. The synchronous is a bit expensive in terms of the data and the need of speed. The self-directed would be more affordable, but it will need good learning materials that are suitable for self-directed learning. So for us, we need to balance the two, and my recommendation is go for the low bandwidth, as mentioned by Dr. Pabella, the low bandwidth chat. But we need to do at least a weekly reconnection between the students and the teachers. So that's something that we need to consider in the balancing up. Okay, we also have to work on the learning load of the students, because our learners may not be able to cope with all the subjects with less supervision from their teacher. So not all students may be able to do that. So if DepEd and CHED will allow us to do some blocking of subjects or grouping, then we I think should take advantage of that to lessen the load of the students. So either all or block, so we need to balance that. My recommendation is to do mix. And for those difficult subjects like math and science, we take the longer blocks, and the less difficult subjects, we may use shorter blocks. Another balancing act is on the assessment. So do we go for a printed paper and distribute the test paper to the students, or we do online? So for online, there are issues on the cheating during exam, but this can be addressed with some easy techniques. And the best one is to provide time limit per question. The other, of course, is to make the questions to be more difficult for cheating, like essay, short essays, questions. Again, so the recommendation is go for online with a time limit per question. So what do we need? Okay, so what do we need? Okay, so this is a study on the implementation of e-learning in Makati City for math teaching by high school, public school teacher. Okay, and basically we have been talking about the blockers, so the platform, the content, the internet, and the devices. But once we decide to move forward with e-learning, we also have to talk about the training of the teachers as well as some other aspect. And from that study, we also seen uh, the leadership of the school as a key success factor. As in many projects, that's what we will normally find. And in this current scenario, we're happy to see that many school leaders are really deeply involved in the implementation of their e-learning system. And that will hopefully help in the successful execution of the program. So one of the things that we need would be the learning management system. There are many learning management systems that we can use. There are open sources like Canvas, Sakai, Moodle, and there are proprietary learning management system. For Canvas, it's an open core, meaning you can get the core features, but not everything. While Moodle is a real open source, so you can get all the features available. And for those who still have no LMS, our recommendation is go for at least the most affordable one, the open source Moodle LMS. You can migrate to a more sophisticated LMS when it's now a normal thing to use LMS. So for now, while we are building the plane, while we are flying it, go for the basics. Okay, so we also have to learn about these many systems. So we have learning management system, school management system, classroom, the team working, video conferencing. So what we have discussed earlier is the learning management system. It is actually managing the learning process of our students. So it's about pedagogy management. School management system is about administration of the school. So registration, tuition payment, etc., attendance, transcript of records, and graduation. The classroom management, on the other hand, is about managing the technology used in the classroom. So it's something that we may not need at this point in time. And then the other one is the group and team working platform. This is where you have a common repository of files, you have communication tools, email system, video conferencing, and some courses and quizzes features in that platform. And the other one, of course, would be the purely video conferencing platform. So our recommendation, again, is the simple one. Go for the learning management system. Those who can afford may also consider school management system. And then if you can afford, you can go for the group license. But actually, most of our laptops already have Office software, so you can opt for that for a start. And then you can also start with a free video conferencing. And if you think you need a longer period for this, you can go for the paid version. Now, there are also other types of learning content. You have e-textbook, workbook, e-books, etc. You can also get lecture videos, simulations, interactive lessons, and interactive quizzes. So for my recommendation would be on the three as the basic. It will help a lot in the self-directed learning if we have these three. Well, even if we have the two, we can do a lot of self-directed learning. Okay. The simulation is good if we have synchronous learning. So during video conferencing, the teacher can actually help the students visualize difficult concepts in math and science using these simulation tools. Of course, there are devices. So you have desktop computers, laptop computers, mobile devices. They have their own positive and negatives. And you can also have e-learning accessible by internet browser or by mobile apps. And my recommendation is just go for the simplest tool, a 7-inch Android tablet, the least expensive. You can even go for second-hand because you will only need the browser to access the e-learning system. And hopefully it will have some 4 gigabyte SD card for those who will need downloading of content from places where there is internet connectivity. So what are the key selection criteria for an e-learning solution? So of course, definitely cost. We're not sure whether we will continuously be using this, but for me, it's a no regret route to have an e-learning system. But we need to be conscious about the cost because we are all challenged nowadays in terms of the financial strength of our school or business. And then, of course, the content, you have to be conscious about this, keeping in mind that you may need something that will be useful for self-directed learning. So that's, I think, the driver. Content that will be useful for self-directed learning will be most appropriate. And then, of course, the learning management system, which I had mentioned earlier. So you may need, of course, some support from those with track record in the implementation. Something that can be implemented readily. It will not take you months to implement would be a very good option. And those that will provide training and simulation for teachers, as well as provide help desk support. Yeah. And of course, go for the no regret route, just go for the basic e-learning package. So open source, lessons and quizzes for self-directed learning, go for some simulation training support for the teacher, and make sure that there's some help desk support. So you can meet all the requirements of SHED or DepEd for that. So we can be your partner. We can help you meet the Department Order 13 requirements. We can support you on that one. We provide content and platform. We provide content for colleges and universities, the mandatory 9 general education subjects. So if you want to implement e-learning, you can implement it with ready to use self-learning materials. We have plenty of content for self-directed learning for senior high schools, as well as for grade 1 to grade 10. Okay, I'm sorry. You can also use simulation tools for experiments. You don't need laboratories. You can do online experiment in science. And the platform that you will get, the Moodle, will provide you a lot of flexibilities in developing your own resources. You can link it with video conferencing, with other websites like DepEd Commons or Khan Academy, etc. So you can do that inside the learning management system and connecting it outside. You can also do some other stuff when you're used to using the learning management system. And if you do online exam, you will have a lot of benefits in the scoring, statistics, item analysis. Oops, sorry. Item analysis. And of course, if you need help, just call us. So you can try our content. If you go to frontlearners.com, try the demo username learn and demo password online. And that's the thing that we can do. Our price is affordable. It's 500 pesos per student per semester for college and for K to 12, 1,000 per student per school year. Okay, so we have, as mentioned, awards for different activities. Okay, so that's all. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Sir
Sir
Leo,
Leo,
for
for
delivering
delivering
a
a
very
very
useful and
useful and
timely
timely
presentation
presentation
on how we
how
should
we should
work on our
work on
learning
our learning
management systems.
system.
For
For
now,
now,
our
our
participants
participants
have
have
an idea
an
on
idea on
how they
how
should
they should
select the
select
most
the most
appropriate and
appropriate
doable
doable
learning
learning
solutions
solutions
as
as
and also
and also
tools.
tools.
Let's go
Let's
on with
go
our
on with
third
our third.
speaker. He's currently in charge of the education partner ecosystem of Microsoft Philippines, has consistent track record of success in working in the information technology industry, and has been with the company for the past 5 years. His prior stint in Microsoft, he worked for one of the largest conglomerates in the Philippines. He has a strong education background with a Master of Business Administration from the Asian Institute of Management and a degree in finance from De La Salle University. He is involved in philanthropic activities as he previously served as one of the board of directors of Junior Chamber International Manila, a nonprofit organization that focuses on leadership development and charitable activities. Let us all welcome Mr. Paulo Balinas to share with us some insights on digital school administration and learning systems for business continuity and blended learning. Paulo.
All right. Thank you, Joyce. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I'm quite excited to share with you, different things that Microsoft is doing in helping schools quickly adapt to this new normal, right? So I was listening in to Sir Leo, Sir Vince, and I definitely learned a lot. So hopefully you learn a lot as well in my talk. So as Joyce mentioned, I'll discuss the topic around, blended learning and how we could use technology to ensure business continuity. So I've been with Microsoft for close to 6 years now and handling education. And one of the quotes by our chief executive officer CEO Satya Nadella is, "Our industry does not respect tradition; it only respects innovation." I think this resonates well with me because with technology, it's disrupted various industries. May it be from healthcare, may it be from travel and accommodation, and yet alone education as well. So the pandemic has caused a lot of problems. What were initially stable industries and lucrative industries are put on temporary risk, like travel, hotel accommodation. And schools are also starting to feel the effects of that. Governments start deciding to suspend classes until August 24, or even to the extreme of until a vaccine is actually found. So I think the mindset is really about, how can we work with the environment that we're in, and what are the tools available to help us quickly adjust to this change. So if you noticed, right, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of schools were forced to suspend classes, to cancel classes until they're able to find a vaccine, or others have shifted to blended learning, and remote learning. So whenever I talk to schools, a lot of schools have decided an overnight digital transformation. But in fact, we all know that change does not happen overnight. I was listening to Sir Vince earlier. JRU took 14 years to actually, perfect the entire system and then adjust as they go along. So building the plane while you're flying it. I like that quote. So whenever we talk to schools, there's no silver bullet in terms of how can you solve all the problems and automatically adjust to this new norm. So it's actually a phased approach and a more holistic approach. So what Microsoft did, whenever we talk to schools especially, it's not offering one solution, but an approach rather. So we developed what we call the education transformation framework. So this is a study done with thousands of educators, schools, to come up with the best practices around the globe in implementing digital transformation in their own respective universities. And we distilled it into four key pillars, four key areas, and I'll go through them one by one. So the first one is leadership and policy. You can't talk about the right tools, the right content, if there is no buy-in from the leadership and management. What I noticed is until there is a directive, from the management, and until there is a nominated champion within the organization who is accountable to drive change, it's very hard to drive effective and lasting change. So that's definitely important. You need the buy-in of your leadership, and you need to clearly articulate and identify policies and guidelines on where the direction your school plans to go and what are the policies and guidelines that a school will follow leading up to that objective. So that's important, having the right leadership and policies in place. The second one is about modern teaching and learning. I'd like to emphasize rather the word modern, because the world, especially the business sector, is rapidly changing. With all the new tech and all. So with that, there's a need for uh, different skills, a different skill set in terms of the talent workforce. So with that, schools are in need to actually align whether or not the content and curriculum that you are teaching to your students are still relevant to the industry, so that by the time that they graduate, they are able to be workplace ready, and minimal to no reskilling is needed. So the great thing about technology is we are able to tap into different learning styles of students. So in the past, it's a one size fits all approach. Now, technology, we're able to cater to the different learning style of each individual. Some are more visual. Perhaps we could cater to more videos to that student, auditory, audiobook. So technology can allow schools to quickly adapt the learning preference or learning modality of each student. The third one is intelligent environments. So it talks about more on the security piece, because living in a data-driven world, data is our new currency, and it's very important for schools to assess whether or not you have the right systems in place to ensure the right level of security. Only the designated people should access certain files, and protect your schools from cybersecurity, potential threats, and data leakages and whatnot. So having that system in place in protecting your data. The fourth one talks about devices for learning. So it was mentioned earlier that eventually during this pandemic or crisis, schools are starting to rethink how are we able to go beyond the four walls of the classroom. So studies show that not all students may have access to a device. So schools are starting to rethink how can we deliver our education beyond the four walls of the classroom, and at the same time in an innovative and cost-efficient ways. So Sir Leo talked a bit about that, looking into cost-efficient devices like mobile phones, tablets that you can access right off a browser. Other opportunities there is using data that you gather from your school into guiding business decision making through data-driven insights. So with the vast amount of information you're collecting from your student enrollment, student profile, you can actually make use of this in a sense to guide your business decision making based on data-driven insights. So with the system in place, on harnessing this information to valuable key information to help guide your moving forward. And of course, operations and IT management. How can you automate certain processes, such as accepting online enrollment, um, accepting online payment, to ensure business continuity despite the external factors such as the pandemic or crisis. So the point I'm trying to drive at is whenever thinking about which platform uh, to implement in your school, it's more than that, right? You need to take on a holistic approach. Uh, Mainly, these four areas are shown to be the best practice in coming up with a phased approach to implementing change. So again, it's not an overnight thing that you do. You decided you want to digital, make your school transform for it to be digital ready. It's not an overnight thing. It's a phased approach by identifying, what are the different milestones that you need to lay as the groundwork to set you up for success. We talked about remote learning. It's completely different from simply, putting your content online. The main reason or the main objective of remote learning is to actually recreate or try to recreate that same learning environment that you're able to have in a face-to-face setting in a virtual environment. So, still having that level of engagement with your student and still being able to effectively relay your topic or subject matter expertise to your students beyond the four walls of the classroom. So again, whenever thinking about remote learning, it's there are a lot of factors to consider, right? Such as do students have the right device? Do they have access to a device at their respective homes? Student emotional needs. So not all students may have a conducive learning environment at home, and of course, bandwidth connection. So bottom line is schools must also think in terms of the readiness of their students and the availability of technology um, to their students if you do decide to implement a remote learning strategy. Uh, Based on this assessment, you'll be able to identify gaps and map out a plan on how you can actually bridge these gaps and make and help them become ready to this new digital world. We talk about remote learning, you can't separate the words synchronous and asynchronous. It has been thrown around quite a number of times, but just to put it into context, synchronous is similar to what we're doing now. We're in we're doing a live session. I'm talking in front of you, and then you're listening live. That's assuming you're available at this specific time and you have access to a device. Asynchronous is more of a self-paced approach wherein you could record the entire session and students can simply view at their own respective time of free time. So the common question is one approach better than the other? So there's no direct answer there. It really depends on your current situation, on the current maturity of your school, and the availability of technology to your students. So that talked about the approach in terms of the phased approach on how we consult schools. Usually it's a whole day event that we conduct this workshop with and map out the milestones on how we could help the school digitally transform. But given the essence of time, I just wanted to discuss the how and what Microsoft is doing to help schools adapt to this new normal. We have what we call Microsoft Teams. So this is basically um, our solution to help schools quickly adapt to our new normal. Just to Before I go into a live demo, I'll show with you. I think I wanted to share with you the impact that we did over the past few months. Apart from helping schools conduct virtual classes share files online. I think a lot of schools had to postpone or even cancel altogether the graduation ceremonies. When when the government announced that of the cancellation, Microsoft thought about how can we use technology to still continue historic occasions such as graduation, because our view is graduation ceremonies are more than a single day event, but an event to actually recognize the achievements and milestones of each student. So we decided to partner with DepEd, and a few months ago, we partnered to launch a virtual graduation. So we even got a message from Secretary Briones, students dressed up in their togas, and they were walked by their parents in a recorded session, and we host that stream that all online using Microsoft Teams. And I think I'd want to share that impact, the impact of technology on how you could think of innovative ways. How can you rethink new ways on how to deliver education beyond the four walls of the classroom? So today, I'll just jump right to it. There's a lot of features that Microsoft you can do with Microsoft Teams, but I wanted to distill it into four key scenarios which you are most likely to encounter as an educator or in your school. So it's hosting a virtual class, being able to personalize the learning experience per student, create assessments, grade them, and finally be able to monitor the students' digital activity. So I'll walk you through a quick demo of how Microsoft Teams looks like. So for the first time, for those listening in, and it's the first time for you to see Microsoft Teams, what Microsoft Education did is we customized the view specific to the educator and learner's needs. So it's different yung itsura niya for business. This one's specific for education. So if you notice, see my screen. This is a dashboard view of a faculty. I'm able to see all of the classes that I am in, from physical science, algebra, entrepreneurship course, and even staff notebooks. I'll go through them one by one. The first scenario I want to recreate is being able to hold a virtual classes, being able to continue their classes in a virtual setting. So this is a calendar view. Each student and each teacher will be given a view of their week's calendar. They can even toggle it to month, day, and whatnot. So it's very easy to organize class. You can organize it to a normal meeting. A regular meeting can host up to 250, but you can scale up to 10,000 if you want to hold a wider event. And soon we're gonna launch and expand it to 100,000 attendees. But for this session, we assume that it's only within the 250 limit. We could simply, select the time that we'd want to, dragging it. So for example, I click here. I just simply need to put my name of the class. So math class, for example, grade 1. I name the class. I add my attendees, Adele and Alex. I specify the date, the time it starts, and the time it ends. If I want to make it 1 hour, if I want to, make it a recurring meeting, a weekly meeting, that's possible. And I do have the option, rather than, add everyone manually, I can add an entire class altogether. So algebra class, I can invite everyone. By default, there's an online meeting option for everyone to join. But if I want a face-to-face, if I want to face-to-face class as well, I can put that as an option, JRU, classroom, for example, classroom 101. And of course, lastly is the details of the meeting. So hello class, see you tomorrow. And I simply click send. But before clicking send, one of the biggest challenges of students and teachers is scheduling availability, especially peer-to-peer faculty. Are you available at this time, etc., etc. So we've taken that, we thought about that, we heard the feedback. So rather than manually ask their availability, you would also have visibility on the invited people's calendar. So if you notice, if it's a solid block, ibig sabihin that person is busy during that time. If it's partially shaded, that means that person is tentative. Perhaps you can ask whether or not you can add him or her during that time. Or during my time, 11 a.m. to 12 a.m. Friday, every Friday, seems that the people are free. So I can block the schedule and simply click send. So to save time, uh, when I click send, everyone will receive an updated calendar. It would be added into their calendar, and they would also access it by simply clicking on it and click join, or they would also receive an email and clicking join meeting. So let's recreate the scenario. So for example, if I were to join a class, I simply click the join now button. Prior to joining, I have the option to turn on my microphone and set device. So I click join now, and in a matter of seconds, I'm pulled into a classroom virtual setting. So what are the features within the classroom virtual setting? So by simply clicking show participants, one of the biggest the initial things that the teacher does is getting attendance. So if you notice here, these are the people invited in the meeting. These are who are in the meeting, invited in the meeting, and who do they suggest based on the commonality of schedules. Who do they suggest to join? So rather than manually take down attendance, screenshotting and all, what you can do is simply download the attendee list. So if you notice here in the upper right-hand corner, I simply click the download attendee list, and an Excel file will be downloaded. And it's like a logbook wherein the name of the student, the time he or she entered, the time he or she exited, I'll be able to have visibility on that. And at the same time, I can manage permissions by clicking this button. I can assign role functions per student. So if I want to be the presenter and students are simply attendees and they listen in, I can manage permissions. I can also mute everyone. If in case medyo maingay and I want to keep the mic to myself, I can mute everyone. Another key classroom feature is the raise hand feature. So if you notice, if I click raise hand and I want to encourage participation across the entire class, I can ask them, class, you can click the button, raise your hand, and I would see a yellow hand beside my name or beside my picture to see that. So I can also, start recording. If in case I wanna have a synchronous session afterwards, we can do a live session now. I record the entire session and share it to the class right after the call for later review, or they could view it at a later time. I can also turn off incoming video if bandwidth is an issue, and everyone has their videos turned on. You can simply manage that. You can turn it off to turn off everyone's video capability to save on bandwidth. And lastly, I wanted to highlight is I can share my screen. Similar to what I'm doing now, you're using Microsoft Teams. I'm sharing my screen. But what you can do is, aside from sharing your screen or a PowerPoint file, you can do a whiteboard session. So I think this is a powerful tool for schools. So it's recreating that classroom setting rather than have a blackboard in front of you. You can, write down hi, or you could write down formulas. So it's up to you. Just again, the value of remote learning is being able to recreate that classroom setting in a virtual environment. And this allows you to do it, right? So coming soon, there's also gonna be a live transcription to make it more accessible. So in the future, there's gonna be in the next few months, there's gonna be a live captioning feature wherein whatever I'm saying is transcribed, and you can download that into text format. So I'll close that. Being able to host virtual classes. But again, I wanted to emphasize Microsoft Teams is more than simply just a classroom. You can do all of that, and you can also manage content with your class, share files, edit files together, and personalize that experience. So again, I go back to my classes, right? So this is my dashboard. I see all of the classes available. If I wanted to click a physical science class, I'm redirected to post tab. So here in the post tab, I can simply chat everyone, greet them. So rather than manage multiple applications for messaging them, keeping them up to date, making announcement, it all can be done here within Microsoft Teams. I can even subgroup them into smaller groups. If I have a 40 class student size, I can create subgroups, maybe groups of 5 into smaller teams. But again, I wanted to focus on 4 key areas, which is the second one is being able to personalize the learning experience. So we have what we call the class notebook. So I think it's very important for students and teachers to be able to collaborate with one another, share files with one another. So what Microsoft did is rather than have a physical notebook, we created a digital version of that, and you can work on files together, or you can have individual notebooks per student. So for example, here in this tab, since I'm the facilitator educator, I have visibility on all of the students included in my class. I can have a shared collaboration space. Ibig sabihin na this is a shared group. Everyone can contribute. All students can add their thoughts, insights. I can have a content library. So the content library is more on if I wanted to be sharing files, documents, without the ability of students to edit them, I can do that. And the great thing about this is I can even personalize the learning experience. So each student, I can create designated notebook. So for example, if I wanted to give additional work for Adele Vance, my student, around the topic of photosynthesis. So if you notice, I just select Adele's notebook, homework, and the specific page, and I can, write my comments, type in my thoughts, give her stickers, or even record an audio recording or video for her to view about my feedback. So the good thing about this is it gives you, the educator, that ability to give real-time feedback, and you don't have to wait to actually meet face-to-face to give your feedback. And the great thing about this as well is we give high emphasis on accessibility and improving the learning outcome. So within here, we have what we call a built-in immersive reader feature. So the tool allows you to read the document aloud to the learner. So for example, I click play. Stop me anytime if you don't hear it.
Starch granules. The food made by the chloroplasts.
So you get the idea, right? So it's highly adjustable. You can make it male voice, faster, slower. You can increase the font size. You can change the font or even add the contrast. For the younger learners, especially K-12, if you want to highlight, teaching them the English language, you can highlight nouns in purple, verbs red. And I think the great feature about this is being able to translate the entire document into hundreds of languages. So I read there's Filipino available, but I read in the chat earlier that there are Korean students who are using online education. So built in within Microsoft Teams, you can convert the entire document into their native tongue, Korean, and you can click play.
전분 과립. 엽록소에 의해 만들어진 음식.
If you notice, basically any text file that you paste here or upload here in a Word document or whatnot can be translated into hundreds of languages, including Filipino. So that's being able to personalize the feedback, the learning experience of students. And if you want to distribute, handouts, lesson materials, you can easily distribute that to a group, to a specific person. You can even review work of students individually and automate that process. Selecting, review student work, homework, and then I can grade basically the students. So photosynthesis session, I would have a view. I can individually view the notebooks of each student. Since I'm pressed in time, I'll skip that. The next feature that I wanted to highlight, second to the last, is the assignments feature. So again, we talked about virtual classes. We talked about sharing files, collaboration. Next is being able to assess. So we can create assignments within Microsoft Teams. Again, it's built in. If you notice, I didn't leave the application. I can simply type the name of the assignment, enter my instructions, add resources. If I wanted to add a PDF file, an Excel sheet, a worksheet, I can add points. If I wanted to put 100, for example, or if I wanted a more qualitative approach or a more rubric approach, so I can identify a letter grade, excellent, good, fair, and identify criteria, corresponding criteria, or even put weights. So each criteria would have a designated weight. I can do that. And finally, the ability to assign to an entire class or to specific students, you can do that as well. You can set the due date, you can set the due time, time allocation if you want that to happen. And you can even allow or disallow late submissions. Again, to save time, this is how it looks like for our students. Hold on. So basically, you'll be able to grade them as well. So for example, I click in chemistry exam. If I'm an educator, I'll be able to see the status of my student submission, whether or not they turned in. I can give my feedback, give my grade, and from a student's view, I would see the title of the exam, the points, instruction, and even go to the exam right within Microsoft Teams. So for example, chemistry exam, I can answer, multiple choice or give an essay answer and click submit. And the good thing about this is it works across all devices, from computers, mobile phones. So access to the learning material is not dependent on your device or operating system. It works across all form factors and operating systems. And it's integratable. The last few things I wanted to highlight is, although Microsoft has pre-built a lot of first-party applications from assignments, video conferencing, sharing of files, we do integrate well with a lot of third-party education applications. So Kahoot, YouTube, Google Drive even, Moodle. I heard the talk about Moodle earlier. You can add Moodle into Microsoft Teams. And how would it look like is you would actually only have a tab up there, and you can access it within Microsoft Teams. So this is, for example, Google Docs, and I'm able to access it within Microsoft Teams. The last thing I wanted to highlight is being able to monitor student activity. So a common question I get from educators or administrators is, malalaman ba namin kung ina-access ba talaga ng school yung learning content? How long? So this is a short video of showing you the built-in tool on how you can actually do that.
One to show for the demo. So now I can see what's happening in my classroom. So all these insights, I'll walk through. We have digital activity. This shows all the things happening for the students in my class. And you can see, I can hover and see what's happening, editing a file, having conversations. And it's really easy to hover and see the different things that were happening. So seeing that digital activity is really important during distance learning. I can click on average grade, and you can see here the average across the class, and I can highlight and I can check the average score on these different assignments that I've distributed. And I can go on-time assignments. Well, it looks like only 9% of people turned in their assignments. There were some that were late and many that were missing. Average time for feedback. Am I giving feedback very quickly? I can see that. And then communication activity. This is really helpful, especially during distance learning. I can see who is communicating with messages and posts. So over here, it looks like Omar had the most communication going on activity in the class, but it's really nice to be able to just see what was happening. And I can look across all channels, or I can even filter on a certain channel, like the general channel. Now, something else that's interesting, I can filter on a student. So I'm dropping down the students, and let's just filter on Ella. Now it just pulls up Ella and all of her digital activities, and I can highlight and see what's happening just with Ella. She worked on the rainforest document, so I can see that there's things happening. And again, I can filter even down to communication files or assignments. I can see the average grade for Ella. I can look at on-time assignments and all those other same things, but on a very specific student. Now, exporting to Excel, you might want to have a chance to be able to export all of these things to a spreadsheet and do even more pivots. But the way it is now, being able to pivot by different student or activity and even by different dates is really powerful insights into your classroom.
Okay, so if you notice, built in again within Microsoft Teams, it gives you valuable insight in terms of what documents your student is accessing, how long, and it also shows you, leading indicators on whether or not this student will fail, on-time assignments, their average grades, and even the response time of teachers to that student. So I think, it's a valuable tool made available for schools, from video conferencing. I think that's the main value prop of Microsoft Teams. It's from video conferencing, editing files, sharing to your students, connecting with other third-party applications and assessing them, as well as analytics. It's all built in within Microsoft Teams as a one hub. And the great thing about this is it's free. We have a free offer via Office 365 A1. As long as you have a .edu domain or recognized as an education institution, everything that I discussed earlier is free. The question around what is paid, if you want the offline access, that's a paid version, but everything online and everything I discussed today is actually free. So I know I went a bit over time, so cutting my time short, ending with this short quote is, our mission is to empower each and every teacher and student to create the world of tomorrow. So for all those educators listening, I truly admire your job, and I really believe that you play a really critical role in shaping the future leaders of tomorrow. So I commend you. Maraming salamat, and thank you. I turn the floor back over to the moderator. Salamat. Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you, Paulo, for your presentation and for giving us a quick demo of Microsoft Teams. And you're right, mission critical right now is to empower our students and teachers so we can create a better tomorrow. But we really hope that we get of course, we have a free version, but we hope we can get the lowest discount from Microsoft Philippines, especially for sorry for putting you on the spot right there. Yeah, so basically what Paulo shared with us is essential, and what we need really is to find out what we need for our respective schools. Readiness, I really appreciate when you said that we have to think about the readiness of the emotional needs of the students apart from the technology needs. And really, there's no one size fits all when it comes to switching to digital. And it's usually a phase-in approach, and Dr. Vince mentioned maybe we just need a boat, not just a yacht right now. So we're now on our second part of our session. We have some questions lined up, and actually Dr. Vince has been very gracious enough to answer the questions already. So as you can see, he has replies for several of the questions to save us some time. So feel free to check on that. But of course, we'll also have questions ready for our speakers. Let me see. So for Sir Vince, the question on how we can best balance addressing the economic struggles of Filipino families and offering quality online education for our Filipino learners. How can we best balance it?
Hi. So that's a question we've been struggling a lot with, and not just at JRU, but also in PACU and with the other universities we talk with. So I think the public belief, let's start with that, is that online is cheaper. That's a public belief, right? And so we're struggling with it because the research really is that, like for JRU, right? I mentioned the NCAT model. That's the National Center for Academic Transformation, which is a nonprofit multi-awarded think tank in the US, which tried to look at how online can deliver education at reduced costs. So their whole focus was reducing costs. They were never able to scale up beyond 30 universities they worked with. So and then they shut down, right? So the jury's out on whether online can heavily reduce costs. So when we talk about balancing the economic needs, which is very important, right? I'd mentioned that. Right now, I would say the story on online versus traditional is that online can be slightly cheaper. But as I put in one of my comments, I think if there's anything that has the potential to really make education accessible and reduce the costs without sacrificing quality, it's really the whole online bandwagon. And the way to make it really cheaper for the students is for schools. I had that whole set of slides on innovation and reviewing your own processes. That's really how you do it, right? I mean, like just a very quick example to end this question, right? When we were planning to go doing part of our planning this summer, the teachers who are already trained in online, right, came back with fixed class schedules, right? They spent a lot of time doing fixed class schedules. This is for college, right? And then one faculty just said, why do we have to do fixed class schedules if it's all asynchronous, right? Meaning that's the very essence of asynchronicity, right? You don't stay there the same time the teacher's there. So all those kinds of just hidden assumptions we make, which have real cost implications. So that's the thing we have to review. Thanks.
Thanks, sir. For Sir Leo De Veles, how is learning guaranteed if students will depend on self-learning modules with no interaction or no internet connection? What are your suggestions in improving their situation? And do we still need textbooks?
That's difficult. Okay, so if we, I'll do the textbook first. I think for the textbook, we have to leave it to the school owners to decide whether they need textbooks, because they have to consider all the stakeholders, parents, the teachers, the students, etc. But many of our client schools have decided not to buy, or only buy those where we don't have content. Okay. The other question about the learning again. Can you repeat that, Joy? Sorry.
It's how can you improve the situation of students who depends on self-learning modules with no interaction and no internet connection?
Okay.
So meaning print-based.
Yeah. Okay. So that would be really that again will depend on the materials that they will use, the self-learning materials that they will use. So it's important for the schools who will use this option to screen these learning materials. The learning materials, like if they have e-lessons and associated formative e-quizzes, can actually help in doing this, and they can arrange the lessons either on a sequential or adaptive learning, meaning if they know already the subject, then they can breeze through the exercises and the quiz questions, move on to the next. So there are technology techniques that can help them with just plain tablet and the right learning materials. So they can do it individually. But of course, it's always to have the supervision of the parents as well as regular checkup with the teachers.
Thanks, sir. For Paulo, how do we see class demonstration in online classes, especially for those which are skills-based?
Sorry, I didn't quite get the question. How
do we see class demonstration happening in online classes? And how can we do skills-based courses, especially return demonstration?
Okay, skills-based. So the things that Microsoft are doing, especially tap into the skills-based, right? We partnered with companies who can actually conduct virtual laboratories. So rather than learn the concepts by reading the book or watching videos, there's actually tools available where we could test and assess whether or not a student actually learned a specific topic. So to put an example, for example, if we're teaching data science, more than understanding the concept of data science, we have tools available that, it's a virtual lab. All of the test data is made available rather than source it on your own. And then the key task that you need to do is how can you use the given data to create a dashboard, for example. So these hands-on virtual labs are the things that technology can actually do to make sure that a skill is actually learned rather than simply the concept.
Thanks, Paulo. Sir Vince has another question for you. JRU has been into ODL for quite a number of years. For the benefit of those schools that are considered a neophyte in this learning delivery mechanism, what can you advise for these schools to survive in this current school year with due consideration on the tight budget?
Thanks. I was actually just typing out a response to that question. So I don't know if the question is about the challenges for a basic education school or a higher ed school. So I was going to do a much more specific response. I'll do a general response, right? So I think the learning curves to go online and to start doing online are a lot shorter, obviously, than what our school went through. But I also think that, so let's do that first. But I also think that it's still a trial and error approach. You will make, I think from the mindset of the manager, the faculty, as well as the department chairs and the VP for academics, you will make mistakes the first semester or the first monthly grading period. The important thing is to have a system where you can capture those mistakes and react quickly, adjust. Right? I think parents and students, maybe I'm speaking too generally, I think they'll be very forgiving if you're able to adjust quickly, right? So that's what you focus on. Now, in terms of the systems, I mean, Paolo already mentioned, I think a lot of the systems the systems will be a lot more affordable than you think. Leo's already talked about very low cost systems, which obviously will need a lot more modification. Moodle is still free, although it's kind of showing its age. In terms of the tight budget, the only thing I really have to say is, as a school administrator, you will, whether you're the school administrator or not, even if you're on the academic side, a department chair or what have you, you really have to go through your budgets. You really have to strip it and see what you should no longer be spending on and realign that. That's the first, right? Just find there's a lot of that cash leading there, even for schools with tight budgets, which you hopefully will be able to realign. If you're in academics, you ask the hard questions. For example, how much of your budgets are related to meeting what you think are still critical accreditation standards or DepEd or Cheddar DepEd standards? Are these things that you can actually defer, not avoid, just defer to bring up your cash year? Because your critical period's probably the next 12 months, right? That's when we're all waiting for a vaccine. That's when we're having problems with face-to-face and public transportation, all of that. So that's what I can say. I actually think the biggest, I might be being a little bit loose with my language here, but your biggest challenge really won't be the budget as much as it will be getting your faculty and on board and getting the content. Luckily, a lot of the content, like Front Learners is an example, right? And there are MOOCs all over the place, is available online. It's usually the Filipiniana part that's hard to get online.
Thank you. Wanted to ask, this has been popped up in the question more often. DepEd has a required number of hours every day per subject, and they say that we still need to follow this. How is it possible with online distance learning? I think they're referring to DepEd Order 13, series of 2020. Yeah. There's it also says a related question to that. How do we save when DepEd requires subscription-based or locally developed LMS for ODL modalities? More, they require 24/7 technical support. Is this only a requirement for private schools?
Yeah.
Anyone can answer.
I have a quick answer. Can I answer? Yeah, I have a quick answer, but I'm going to make it bato. So I saw a lot of questions about DepEd Order 13. My guess is that's the rubric, no? The one they're saying we're going to check up on you with all these requirements. Yeah, so our usual process is when when government regulations come out that seem a little draconian or heavy, we bring it up to the private school associations, and they have a direct line to DepEd. So we're lucky on this call. We have the vice president for PACU, so I'll make it bato to him. But I think it's something they can do, and the executive director for PACU pala, who's our moderator. So we can make it bato to them, and we can bring up those issues. Right. There's another one who said 24/7 tech support. I mean, that I just commented that's really crazy, right? We're not a BPO, and I don't think any parent will demand 24/7 tech support. So there's clearly stuff there that's kind of peculiar. Thank you.
Maybe I can share a slide on this. So yeah, there are new things, and it's good if if the association can help challenge some of this one. But there are things that we can help schools if they outsource the services, like the 24/7. You're actually allowed to pass it on to a third party, because the school cannot have a 24/7 support for the parents and the teachers, etc. Those kind of things, I think some will be solvable if we partner together with LMS provider like ours, of course. I have to pitch, but yep, that's something that I just would like to share.
Okay, for Paulo, there's a question. Can we use our Outlook account to link to Microsoft Teams? And there's another question related to that. You mentioned the free version for education, but it seems you recognize only .edu domain. How about private schools with no .edu domain? Can you also help them?
Yeah, so by default, the .edu domain is our parang filter to recognize that school as an education institution. So for those private universities who are interested to get it, we have a partnership with PLDT in providing access there. So perhaps we can work with PLDT to reach out to you, how we could help you for your requirements.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so again, thank you. I think we have run out of time, and we still have questions in the live Q&A event. For sure, we will send you copies of the slides for our presenters, and we'll still have time to answer in the chat box below. But for now, we will be at this point. We'd like to quickly wrap it up. Of course, we thank our speakers, of course, and our viewers who have tuned in this morning and afternoon, rather. On behalf of PACU, PAYAC, and PLDT Enterprise, we thank you all for spending this memorable time with us. Again, one of the things that we have to consider right now, the University of the Future is offering online or even a hybrid of face-to-face and online. And these options should keep their students engaged. We are working very tirelessly on this, but we are very positive that through distance learning that we are doing now, we are able to see that future in education. We have tough days ahead. Families and livelihoods are threatened by this economic crisis, but of course, we have to wait for the vaccine because the transmission is really imminent. But we have to persist. We cannot and should not stop learning, and this education process must continue in order not to derail the economic progress of our nation and the academic formation of our students. One of our trustees mentioned that the wiser course of action really, and he's President Michael Alba, he said that we have to take this pandemic crisis by the horns and use it as an opportunity to use distance learning, both online and asynchronous, as a second mainstream mode of delivering education. Expanding this capacity seems to be the only recourse that will address the immediate need of resuming a safe learning experience, as well as build the resilience needed against future disruptions. We need to work with government, private HEIs, and businesses must create an ecosystem that will make this an aspiration, a reality. For now, continuing education is about innovation and leveraging available tools or technology for a connected learning experience in a disconnected world. So with that, we would like to thank again our very good speakers. We learned a lot from you today. And we will see you next week, same time, and on a Wednesday again, as we proceed with our third webinar entitled Challenges of Distance Education in a School Ecosystem, Design Challenges and Innovations. Thank you again. This was One With You, an PACU PLDT Enterprise Virtual Forum for the Academe industry. And we'll see you again. Stay safe, everyone.